Welcome to Tell This Story, the podcast that's redefining what it means to thrive after a life of service. I'm Doug White, a veteran, retired first responder, and author of Hiding in Plain Sight, The Truth About Trauma, Service, and the Way Forward. Here we go beyond the surface. This isn't just about origin stories or the struggles that come with service. At Tell This Story, we dive into what comes next, how veterans, first responders, and their families can rise above the challenge, embrace resilience, and unlock a future full of purpose, strength, and growth. Our conversations are real, raw, and rooted in empowerment. We explore the science behind service, unpacking concepts like allostatic load, and the profound physiological and neurological changes that come with high-stress careers. But we don't stop there. We bring you actionable insights, tools, and inspiring stories that help you show up as the best version of yourself for your family, your community, and your mission. This isn't just a podcast. It's a movement to transform struggles into strength and challenges into opportunities for growth. Tell This Story is proudly brought to you by Polestar Coffee, fueling the brave with the finest blends, crafted for those who push boundaries every day. Check them out at polestarcoffee.com. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening. Your support helps us grow, share these powerful stories, and reach people who need this message most. Now let's get started. Welcome to Tell This Story. Today we're honored to welcome Jadie Miller, a seasoned firefighter with nearly 2 decades of dedicated service in Ontario, Canada. Throughout her career, Jadie has served both as a volunteer and full-time professional, exemplifying unwavering commitment to her community. In 2018, Jadie confronted a profound personal challenge when she experienced an injury unique to the firefighting profession. Jadie began a crusade to find the answers, to get back to her crew, and to get back to normalcy. Jadie's journey led her to Dr. Chris Free's research on operator syndrome. A pivotal aspect of Jadie's work involved her collaboration with Dr. Free. Together, they adapted the operator syndrome framework, originally developed to understand the complex health challenges faced by military special operators, to create the Firefighter Syndrome framework, providing a comprehensive perspective on the unique health and wellness challenges encountered in the firefighting profession. Motivated by her personal journey and a deep-seated desire to support her fellow first responders, Jadie founded PYROC. The company's mission is to revolutionize the care and optimize the performance of society's first responders, addressing challenges like firefighter syndrome. Jadie is a seasoned speaker and trainer. She's also collaborated with fire chiefs across North America, providing consultation and instruction on addressing the unique challenges faced by firefighters. Notably, Jadie has been a featured speaker at various conferences and training sessions, including the 8th Annual Firefighter Health and Wellness Conference. Jadie has also led webinars and been on podcasts. Join us as we delve into Jadie's inspiring journey, exploring her experience as a firefighter, her pioneering work on firefighter syndrome, and her unwavering commitment to enhancing the well-being of first responders. Jadie Miller, welcome to Tell This Story. How are we doing today, Jadie?
We're doing awesome. It's pretty cold in our neck of the woods in Ontario, Canada, but we're surviving and loving life. Thanks for having me today.
No, thanks. As I told you when we first spoke about this is part of a series, and I believe it's going to be wrapping up a series on the physiological and neurological effects of service on first responders and veterans. And you're very, very important to this conversation because everybody that I've had on so far is, for the most part of the veteran community, and it's founded this in the veteran community. But you're the bridge builder. You're the one that brought this with the work of Dr. Chris Free. You brought this to firefighters in the framework of firefighter syndrome, and hopefully are waking up people in the first responder disciplines at large. So it was a wordy intro, but tell us who is Jadie?
Just a firefighter, somebody who...
I love that.
The only reason why I was allowed to get on the bridge is because Dr. Chris Free invited me. So without his generosity and his time commitment and dedication to this project, it didn't take much for him to understand and see the need. Once we started, looking at the data and the statistics of the gaps within the information that surrounded what we knew about firefighters as a whole, he said, this is crazy. We know literally almost nothing about your industry. Let's go after this. So I was invited to the bridge because of him. But as soon as I get invited, I really like being there. So who I am is just somebody who I usually challenge everything that's presented to me. I need to know why. And if you can't provide me with a logical why or a scientific based why, then I will challenge you. And I joke around a little bit and I say, I'm kind of like an olive. You either love me or you don't. And I have an insatiable love for humanity. I think most people are stupid sometimes. And I say that with love and affection, just because of the craziness and kind of the crazy stuff we see as firefighters. You're like, I can't believe, like, how did that even happen? So it makes you kind of scratch your head and go, what happened? But I have an insatiable love for humanity. And it's just, in order to protect humanity, we need to protect those that protect the rest. So here I am, doing what
I love that. Like, you love humanity, an insatiable love for humanity, but wonder why people do some of the silly things that they do. Well, from the law enforcement side, that's where we as your cousins differ. People do dumb things. So where you say, wow, how did that happen? We're like, yeah, that checks out. Well,
Sure.
if you're checking for leaks in your propane line with the lighter, you're going to change your lighting conditions.
But I also call that
You call it what?
job security.
No, it is. It is job security.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that's awesome. But so in Canada right now, your career spans nearly 20 years. You're coming up pretty close to that. So you have volunteer service and regular full-time fire experience. And I used to teach as a contractor for Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. So I know the ICS lingo and all that stuff because I've taught it and I've actually used it down here quite a bit before I retired. But as far as the lingo for the fire service, I'm going to get everything wrong. So feel free to giggle at me.
No worries.
It's funny, depending on where you are here in this country, the lingo is even different. Like in the Northeast from the South, the lingo is different. But
that's the
anyway,
same.
Yeah. So you volunteer and then full-time. What's the difference, like level of service for volunteer versus full-time?
Well, again, it depends on where you are in North America. But generally, the easiest way to sort of categorize the two is when you're a volunteer, you're balancing another full-time job or several full-time jobs, as well as being on call 24/7 to respond to the emergencies in the direct community in which you live. So a lot of those folks that go through the journey as volunteers never have the capacity to turn it off. They're very turned on all the time. In fact, a lot of them, and as did I, they will get jobs or work with their employers so that they are given opportunities to leave their employment to go serve if an emergency call comes in. So they're they're truly just pushed to the next level of service. They really, truly are. And is probably one of the main reasons why there's a recruitment and a retention issue with the volunteers across North America, because they just burn out. And as for the professional, there's a span of different schedules across North America from Canada to the US, whether it's a 24 on, 24 off, or a 42, or a 48. And then, there's 72 hours where you have to work in a row. And the schedules are really kind of different. But should a professional firefighter or a full-time firefighter come off duty, they are permitted the opportunity to shut down should they choose to do so. Unless there's a sort of a large-scale event where they do what's called a hire back or a callback or an upgrade to the call. And so if it's a large community event, we'll use the LA Fire. It's probably a good topic.
Yeah.
Everybody would just be, and you'd just be completely dedicated to that service the whole time you're there. And so your schedule goes out the window. There's no time to shut off. You're in it to win it, so to speak. But I think the biggest difference is volunteer doesn't get the opportunity to shut off, and a full-time sort of gets, they do just choose, they usually choose not to, but they can if their lifestyle and their support systems permit them to.
That's a fantastic answer, and actually led to the point that I was trying to make. At the first responder disciplines, we often live in the areas we work. And in my experience, for 17 of my 25 years, I was in patrol, and I worked the majority of that time in the area that I served. So I went to the grocery store. I went to the malls. I went to my kids' schools. There were reminders everywhere, people that I had seen at work. Tampa, Florida is not a very small community by any stretch, but you see those things and you can't turn that off. So much so that when my wife and I were dating, and we go back to the very beginning of my career, and I told her, if somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, Doug, everything's fine. It's cool. I know this person." But if somebody says, "Hey, Deb," or Deputy White or something like that, get away from me. Go away. Go to the car. Don't look back. Go. I will call you. Because if they're that unfamiliar with me, I don't want to have to waste time thinking if this is going to be a threat or not. So that actually happened to us in the mall. Our daughter was in a stroller, and somebody came up behind me and said, "Deputy White." And I turned around, and it was a student from our police academy. And said, "Oh, hey, how's it going? I'd like to introduce you to my," I'm looking around, the wife is gone. I called her and I said, "Where are you at?" She goes, "I'm in the parking lot." I said, "It's a deputy from the academy. I think we might need to modify. I don't know how we're going to modify it." But anyway, yeah, not being able to turn that off is definitely one of the hallmarks of something that we all experience and can take a toll. To that point, in 2018, you had quite an experience that a lot of people have, that a lot of people in the first responder disciplines have had. And it's shocking if we experience it ourselves. It's something that we try to figure out. Would you like to unravel that a little bit for us?
Yeah, you bet.
I think it's very interesting, and it's a very powerful story.
It's a privilege to have a platform to unravel it, because every time I say it, it's not about kind of giving counseling back to myself. I'm picturing someone out there that is kind of floating through and trying to figure out what's going on in their own journey, or perhaps they haven't woken up to where they are in their own journey. And when I get the opportunity to just share, my eyes are on them going, I just want to give you a safe place for you to compare your story. And I have no problem sharing mine, so you can get an understanding of where you are at in your own journey. So if you're out there and you're listening, I hope this provides you a safe place. So, in 2018, so the backstory to kind of who I was leading into this position, I think is important to understand. So I had a childhood that provided some significant challenges: physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, and kind of found myself homeless, found myself in situations where I didn't have anybody raising me. And I really had to learn how to pick myself up, not play the victim card, and continue to move forward. And throughout that process, I received counseling. I really embraced emotion. And in fact, emotion became a part of my identity, in the sense that I was very in tune with who I am. I was very in tune with how I used emotion to move forward and how much control I had on emotion up until this point. It became a sort of a secret superpower for me, is how I liken it. And I'm never afraid to cry in public. I'm never afraid to get over emotional, and then sort of sift through those emotions and say, where is this coming from? And then find the root cause. So up until this point, that's kind of how I identified myself. And so moving into 2018, I was starting to lose my ability to regulate my emotions, and I was avoiding emotions. And I was getting to a point where I was using the wrong emotions at the wrong time. They were starting to define me rather than using them as a tool to service my community. And in 2018, we had a structure fire come in, and what I say should have been the Super Bowl of firefighting. It's in the name, firefighting. What should have been the Super Bowl, we have a trapped patient, we're doing our thing. En route to the call, I was searching for that toggle switch that fires. I was searching for, that toggle switch that says it's playtime, we're going in, and couldn't find the ability to prepare for what was coming. And in fact, what I was starting to recognize slowly in the moment was that I was feeling nothing. I had nothing left, which in the moment I didn't register. I can say that now looking back on the situation. But as I was going into the call, there's just this empty shell of something that was now no longer me. And so we get to scene and we're given tasks. And I was new to the department that I was working for at the time. And I did not complete tasks and didn't care. It could have burned. People could have died. My service to my community meant nothing else. Nothing no longer meant anything. If my comrades passed away in the fire, didn't care. If I passed away in the fire, even if I felt like I could even go in, didn't care. A lot of things were happening up until this moment, but this was the moment where I stepped back and said, okay, thumbs up. I will say that this moment, coupled with a secondary situation that happened at home, it was really my wake-up call. And I'll come back to this call in a second, but the moment at home I think is important because it became a balancing scale situation where I was like, okay, I'm not okay at home and I'm not okay at work either. So at home, the situation was I have a 5-year-old daughter who is putting laundry away and I'm screaming at her and I'm saying, put your stupid laundry away. Like, let's go. What's wrong with you? And up at this point, I was really like super close with her, but I'm screaming at her. I'm yelling at her. And she's got this ginormous gray beanbag. And she kind of plunks into the beanbag and she's like, Mommy, come here. And because my 5-year-old daughter had the balls to call me in and say, sit with me, Mom. And she did. And she said to me, I feel like I'm losing my mom. Where's my mommy? And that was kind of first part. That was very jolting. Having come from a family where I didn't have parents, I'd always dedicated myself to being a mom that I never had. Now, just to be clear, the mom that I didn't have was the mom I was supposed to have. So that's a whole other topic, but I have no remorse about my parents. And I have no animosity toward my parents becoming disenfranchised as parents. But that also forced me to try to be something different. So now I have my daughter. I've broken my commitment. I'm no longer the mom that my daughter needs, and I'm no longer the firefighter that my team needs. So after returning back to the call in this story, after saying no to direct commands and fully knowing that I absolutely compromised my reputation, not only as a new firefighter, but I will say it, also as a female firefighter, which at the time was part of my hypervigilance that I was going through, not feeling good enough to fit in, which wasn't the truth. It was something I put on the situation because of what other females had said. And I could do a whole other podcast about that, but they were wrong and are wrong, to put the record straight. These issues come from us, not our peers. There'll always be douchebags. That's just the bottom line. But any member is allowed on the front line as long as they earn their position. So fully knowing that I had compromised that position, I had sort of just enough to climb back on the truck at the end of the call. And I absolutely hung my head and said, what was that? And so I do call it the what was that moment, because when I say that, every first responder listening goes, oh, I've had that what was that moment where I was not myself. So in that situation, nothing bad happened to anybody on call just because I failed to execute, but it could have. And then so the what if ruminated in my head for a little bit, not long, but it did. And I sort of pulled back and said, I'm not okay. And wanted to sort of figure out why I was feeling this way. And the only answer that existed in our current structure is PTSD. And the bottom line is that PTSD is real, but not every injured firefighter or first responder has PTSD. It's a part of the equation, and one which we spotlight far too strongly. But I went through this, is this PTSD? What's going on with me? And through the support of my husband and my daughter again, I was given free rein to challenge the system, because that's what I do. And I started looking for a psychologist, and I was like, this isn't right. This isn't. And then when I would fill out their stupid test the test, the only test.
I know what you mean. The only test.
But
a very subjective test.
It is extremely subjective. And not only is it subjective, it doesn't look at us from a cellular component. And that is what Firefighter Syndrome does. But I was going through this process, and unbeknownst to me, when I would fill out this stupid test, I was filling it out through a biased lens and a wall that I had built to fill it out correctly. So I was at the stage where it became part of my own problem, where I was filling it out incorrectly by filling it out with a biased lens. I know it gets complicated. I'm sorry.
No, I'm smiling because I did the same thing.
Right.
It's just me and this piece of paper, and I don't want to tell this piece of paper about me.
Right. But then when I would fill it out again, and then I would have this psychologist or this counselor say, you don't have PTSD. And then this one say, I don't know. Maybe have you seen your doctor? Have you gone over here? And I was getting the runaround. And even if I wanted to say that it was PTSD, it just didn't feel right. Because then when you start meeting with the counselor and they start giving you treatment, it's not fitting the bill. So I started looking for other psychologists because it wasn't working and it wasn't fitting the bill. I wanted to get back to what I call my tribe, my family, my work. I wanted to find value. My value was stripped from me for whatever reason. At that time, I didn't know. And the only thing I wanted was to regain the value that I felt. Enter Dr. Chris. I was looking for a psychologist sort of all over the world. There was New Zealand, there was Australia. I found one guy in Hawaii, and I reached out to him on LinkedIn. And I basically said in, 2 sentences, the first responder world is falling apart. And I think you might be the guy to fix it. Would you meet me? And he said, you bet. And he did not disappoint. So for over 2 years, we committed weekly plus to reframing and reworking the operator syndrome to be suitable for firefighter syndrome. I strapped a bunch of sensors to myself. I used all my own data. I did blood work, off duty, on duty, you name it. I did whatever I could feasibly do as a basic firefighter to acquire the data that could validate that this framework was specific to firefighting. 100 days of that, both on and off duty. There was no break. Hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Like, I'd have to move forward 5 minutes and then be like, what did I just do? And I'd, record it because it was all manual, No big fancy tech. I was like, let's just do this. So I would move forward 5 minutes. What did I just do? 5 minutes. So the longest 100 days of my life, but it became so evident so quickly. I could have done 2 days, to be honest, that it was relevant. So all of a sudden, this moment where I'm empty, where I've never put a gun in my head, and I'm not even going to pretend like I know what that moment is like for those that are suffering. Wow. But when you feel nothing, anything is possible. That I understand fully well. And a lot of that is physiological. It's not necessarily psychological. It can be, for sure. But here I am as a little kid that's learned my emotions. I have been through some stuff. I have learned how to process. I have learned how to sit quietly with myself. And I've now lost that ability because of I'm in the best place in my life. I have the greatest job. I have a great family. I have a beautiful daughter. My husband couldn't be more supportive. And now all of a sudden you're telling me that I'm suffering from this ability to process trauma. No, sorry, I'm not buying it. It's not what happened. What happened to me when I look back at the situation is my physiological capsule was injured. And because of that, the mixed messages, the inability to process it from a physical component is what was disabling me as a first responder and disabling me as a mother and a wife and a contributing member of society. It had stripped my cellular, stripped me down. And once I started to understand that journey, it now became a physical healing journey. Sleep was the number one piece of medicine that's needed. Willing to not drink, being willing to adjust my diet, being willing to say no. I've just operated on 2 hours of sleep. I can't do X, Y, and Z today. And by having that understanding of, well, now this complex injury is found in firefighter syndrome, here's the 19 or 18 or 20 different domains that describe it, and now having the ability to manage those and get my blood work, see where I'm at with the cellular component of things, I've now regained my value. I have a mission and I'm back into the team. I never left the team physically. I never took time off work. I was shifted into a secondment at the exact same time. So there was privilege in that. And so that allowed me to continue as an active duty member versus taking time off work to heal. But I had value. For anybody that's out there who things just don't feel right, you're right. It's not right. And I don't know how else to describe it.
I think you did a perfect job of describing every bit of it. So much I want to unpack from that. We spoke about if one person or two people or three people will hear our voices, are on these platforms and hear the message that we're saying, then we've done our job. But it's going to be more than that. I've, in fairness to anyone listening, this is maybe their first time ever hearing of Jadie Miller, but I have, due to my own fear of failure, I have probably consumed more of your material in the last week than most people. It's kind of creepy. Several podcasts, your articles, your studies, looking at it from every possible aspect. I know the domains and all of this other stuff. And I thought that getting on here, I may find a tidbit. And I had a podcast this morning that you were on that I listened to. I was like, God, I need to sit down so I could take notes. And here I am. I've learned something else. Now, I know that when we listen to other people's stories, a lot of people will listen autobiographically, meaning that when I hear your story, I'm looking for parts of me in it, looking for the shade of your story for me to step out and tell mine. And it's amazing that the story that you just told about your injury in 2018, I've heard a half dozen times, read the article twice, even had the article read to me by the AI on Crackle's website, just to get the full feeling and sit back and soak it in. And not until you started telling your story did I connect with that moment you had standing there, not caring about anything, frozen. And I actually wrote about it in my book. I mean, I've got 20-something thousand words between my journal and my book, and I did not connect. There's a section in my book, it's called Not Without Bad Days, and it was an event that happened at Disney with my family. And I saw this unfold, the first person to see it, the first person to recognize it, and I stood there frozen. I had no capacity to do anything. I felt nothing except hatred for myself. But what was that moment? And I handled it completely inappropriately with the family, with the children, with my own self. And it was a year after I started getting help from, let's say, professionals. And it was still a good year before I found the study operator syndrome. Which, by the way, Dr. Freeze, Chris's book and work, it's a treasure map. It was my way forward. And you're right. You didn't need 100 days. Once you see it and understand that, wait a second, this is all, you said this physical vessel, that's exactly what this is. It's all connected. And I was working my way to figuring out operator syndrome before I knew what operator syndrome was. By doing the blood work, by doing the sleep studies, by doing the mental and emotional stuff. I had no idea what I was doing, and I happened to be doing all of the right stuff on accident by listening to people in the space, listening to Doc Parsley about sleep, listening to Dr. Andrew Huberman about nutrition and, the AG1 and getting your greens in and superfoods and rest and circadian rhythm. I happened across it all by accident. And then finding operator syndrome, the study, and then later the book, finally having a name and knowing that I wasn't alone. And then through meeting Chris and interviewing him just a couple of weeks ago, finding Firefighter Syndrome. It's like, wait a second, what is Firefighter Syndrome? How come they get their own syndrome? That's kind of dumb. And then looking into it, I was like, wait a second. This all seems so familiar. And I had to reach out to you. So doing your blood draws, all the work you did, the dedication you did, and then working with Chris for 2 years to put this thing out. What is it that you found? I mean, you said this is the human experience. And you're a firefighter. I'm former Leo veteran. We all have experiences, the adverse childhood experiences. We all come to our professions and what we do in life, carrying our own baggage and our own experiences, which allow us to handle things well or handle things poorly. But there's always an opportunity to handle it one way or the other. But even though I've been in a burning building before, I don't recommend it. Once, not something I look forward to. We all have experiences or experiences adjacent in what we do as responders, saving lives, running towards the gunfire, running into the fire. Regardless of whether I have your same experiences, my body doesn't know the difference. My body doesn't know that I'm a firefighter or a law enforcement officer. We all have the same reactions. I really want to highlight what you've done here in finding the domains and the 19 domains. And of course, you don't have to cover them all because I'm going to have it all linked to the podcast, but explain some of these things that you found in Operator Syndrome. Because a lot of people have said to me, well, this is for veterans. No, it's not. Read the study. Forget about the title, read the study. So what was it that you found?
Well, I might challenge you a little bit.
Okay. I forgot. You spent a lot of time with Chris, and Chris wants me to be specific with my words. And let me clarify this, man. Okay. Make me a better communicator. Go ahead.
No, you're fabulous, first of all. Operator Syndrome is for operators.
Yeah.
Firefighter Syndrome is for firefighters. Though the framework is different, there is much to unpack for each unique community that is specific to the unique community. And a human body is a human body. But how your body responds to those 19 domains will be different than how my body responds. So there is a similarity, that the commonality, the thing that to support what you've just said is that if those of us that are responding negatively to the journey, if we continue on the same trajectory, we will hit the same finish line, maybe at different times, maybe in different ways, and the finish line will be an injury. But when you compare the syndromes to what's required as a professional athlete, one of the variables there is defined by how we recover. True gains is found in recovery. And so, although we're suggesting that all of the stuff about our jobs cause injury, and so now the big fear, and I don't know why people are afraid of this, because you can get injured walking down the street. Oh, this job is going to cause me injury. Sure. Driving a post office delivery van will cause you injury too at some point. Listen, it happens. You're trying to live in a bubble. Good luck. But although the jobs are going to cause injury, so if you as a recruit are all balls in and you are like in it to win it, cranking it out day and night, your trajectory could possibly be faster to the finish line than somebody who is recovering more adequately. And so and I did listen to the podcast with you and Chris, and I thought it was fabulous. And it really becomes about using this tool in sort of three ways. And the tool, the questionnaire, is the I'm not injured, and I'm going to use it as a treasure map, as you say, which is to work hard to avoid the injury. I'm now currently injured, and I'm trying to figure out how to get out of this injury, would sort of be the second way. But now I've gotten out of the injury, and my new baseline is not what it used to be. So I'm going to use this tool as a way to journey along my new baseline with the knowledge that I have. So one of the things that I've found in Firefighter Syndrome compared to Operator Syndrome is one of the differences, and I'm going to bring in the management piece that you and I spoke about just kind of offside, which is there's sort of three pieces to this, is how am I as an individual recovering and accepting kind of my journey. But one of the things that I personally, I think, bring to this journey that is different is the emotional piece, which has a great impact on how we view the syndrome, how we view our injury, both before, in it, and after it. And it's not job specific, but it does go with these particular jobs. There are personalities that are drawn to it. There are experiences people have had that in life that draw them to these perfections. And so one of the things that I have noticed is the more intimate we are with ourselves and the more willing we are to sit in silence with ourselves and face our uncovered, ugly truths, the more success we will have. And so it's not about filling out a DSM-5 or even filling out the firefighter questionnaire or the operator syndrome questionnaire. It's about how raw are you willing to go? And I always say in a lot of my talks that courage is not found at the doorstep going into the fire, nor is it found in the fire. It's found at the coffee table. And the coffee table is where real discussion happens. If you don't have the courage to have coffee and be real, then you won't have the courage that it takes to continue in the fire. So get quiet with yourself, learn your truth. And sort of the other piece of the equation that I think that I've found is that when we talk about that management piece, usually those that are in management have gone up through the ranks in various different speeds, some too fast, and they lack the ability or the skills required to lead. Some want to lead with the most moral integrity compass, and they truly desire to do what's right for the staff that are in the front line, dogging it. They just don't know how. And a lot of the times what happens is that they get pulled in reporting to their superiors. And so that is another very distinct difference between operator syndrome and firefighter syndrome, which is the way that the leadership presses down on the folks that are below them and the demands that they have for the organizations. That's very culturally specific. Although most of the first responders are paramilitary, they are very different and they operate on different legislations, different regulations, different best practices versus a military execution. So one of the biggest differences within this framework is how it's used within an organization or not used within an organization. And that's what makes it specific to the occupation. The physiological response of a human body, yes, I'm with you and I agree with you, so I won't push on you there. The speed in which that happens, let's have a little more in-depth discussion about why that could or could not happen. Perhaps.
Please, yes.
Right? Well, I mean, there's more to uncover. And then even there's a gender thing too. I'm 47 years old. I'm telling you right now, my hormone system's not working the way it used to. And so not only am I dealing with the, occupational issues that I face with, physiological, I'm dealing with just being a woman. It's not fun. And so there are some gender differences there too, physiologically and, science-based wise. And so I'm going to rocket past you. I'm going to sprint to the finish line. I'm probably going to injured again just because of the dysregulations within my hormone system right now. But my recovery is more intelligent than it ever has been before. So I'm going to finish well. So that's sort of a long-winded way to answer your question. So to sort of wrap all that up, there's three basic things that I found, which is the way that the management is using the syndromes or not using the syndromes or identifying and more so acknowledging and adapting the syndromes within their cultures, but they are the ones that are driving the intensity of the syndrome. And so they are absolutely different. The rest and the recovery of the individual is very different. And then the speed in which we get there is very different. So I'm not sure if that completely answered your question.
It does. And it kind of brings me to another question. I can't speak to the fire service other than I know some firefighters and I've seen them working over the course of 25 years. But in law enforcement, for the most part, at least during my generation when I was coming up, again, before the turn of the century, the responder disciplines, law enforcement, the culture was almost, you had to go all in. If you wanted to be worth your ass, if you wanted to be a meat eater, be counted among those who were sitting at the coffee table, the tough guys, you had to go all in. The organization would say, don't ever say no, because if you do, they'll never ask you to go again. So you never turned down an assignment, never turned down a request or an ask or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to go to the classes. You didn't have to go to the range every weekend or every other week or every week on your days off. But if you wanted to survive a gunfight, you better be at the range and shoot some bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Basic skills that you have to do your jobs. So doing that, it almost leads to the drive to be all in, to over-identify, to have that as part of your persona. And that's different degrees depending on what your upbringing was and how you came into the profession, what your experience and life experience was when you got there. But, for me, in my experience, I was all in from day one of the academy to the day that I hit the street.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Until I realized that this has a shelf life. And I got to the finish line. It took 20 years to get, or 22 years to get to that end state where, like, wait a second, now I have to repair. So I would be using the checklist to figure out there are things going on wrong. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
And try to reverse engineer my way into all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that being said, we spoke about leadership and everything else. What is it that we can do as responder disciplines and discipline specific? And I want to talk about the organization, but not the organization and the way that they deal and the way they push down. And now I will ask this question by giving my statement. I feel that getting information like this to recruits in the academies, not day one, but enough to where they start understanding that there are going to be physiological changes and stressors on their bodies. There's going to be demands on them physically and emotionally as they go through. These are some of the signs and symptoms of the things that you may or may not experience. And here are the things you can do to mitigate that. Here's how you make good nutritional choices. Here's how you seek help. Here's how you, just emotional intelligence, knowing who you are, getting rid of the stigmas surrounding all of this, letting people know that, hey, if you're going to be a first responder, you're not going to catch PTSD. I mean, I've even heard that, I don't want to be a cop or go in the military because I don't want PTSD. Stop.
Mm-hmm.
Stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like somebody sneezed on you, now you have PTSD or diabetes. That's not how these things are contracted. I think the biggest thing that I want to do is get this into these kids. Again, I'm 51. So everybody's a kid that's 50 and younger. But I want to get these kids and their families just as important. I want their families to understand that these are some of the signs. So they don't have the beanbag talk with their daughters. And I've had those moments, and I had to keep my composure while you told that story, because I heard you tell that story on a different podcast, but it's different when I'm looking at you and you're telling it. I've had those moments. And so anyway, I think if we get this stuff into the academy, this framework or something similar to this, and the organizations or states and countries codify this stuff and say, this is part of curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where we need to go. So people don't do like I did and hide from it or run from it or think it's a weakness or think it's something that can be compelled by just saying, I got to be tougher than this. Is that the message? Am I on the right track here?
It's definitely a place to start. In Ontario, I have worked with these fire-specific academies, and I have done firefighter syndrome training to students that desire to be firefighters. I mean, their journey within Ontario, at least, and much across the nation, is between 3 to 5 years it takes for a firefighter to get hired full-time. The effort is significant. You can't just jump in and enroll. So in teaching at the fire academies, one of priorities has always been about working to change the culture within the first responders. Police is a very independent culture. It's not team-based unless you're getting into a special unit. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
You're correct.
One of the things that I see is when a police officer is starting to get to the point where they are losing their ability to regulate their emotions. They get back in their own police car and they go and they don't get the opportunity to have anybody else help them through what they're going through. And in the paramedicine world, there is a strong desire by a lot of paramedics to be the best. And it almost would appear to be a competition amongst them that fosters not wanting to help someone who's maybe not the best. In the fire service, we are unique that we ride in a truck of 4. We have a eat your young mentality where as a rookie, you come in, you shut your mouth, you work harder than everybody else. And I quite like the culture that way. I believe in it strongly. And I think the more that we move away from that culture of earning your position, the more we're seeing these injuries increase. No matter where you are in the scale of a first responder, starting with the schools and teaching them that bravery happens at the coffee table, that vulnerability of, no, I'm not okay, or man, like something's totally up with me. I don't know why did anybody else feel this way? No. Okay, what's up? And hey, well, when's the last time you had your blood work tested? Well, no, I haven't. Well, buddy, get in there, get it done. You're probably slipping. Let's get you fixed back up, right? Changing the mentality of how we protect each other is the number one priority for these syndromes. Those on the front line need to recognize the signs and symptoms of slipping or falling into the injury or just not being okay. And then those around us need to say, hey, I know what's going on here. How can I help you? Come on, buddy, let's go. Like this old school mentality of, I don't know, taking care of each other that we seem to have lost. And when you look back in history, soldiers used to wash each other's feet, and firefighters used to help firefighters roof their houses. And I don't know what paramedics did, but they did stuff. But there used to be a protect each other mentality. And if I could only inspire one change, it would be that stop looking at each other like you are better than the other person. Stop looking at the other person like they are weaker than you. I don't care what you call it. PTSD, you call it sad leave, or you call it a syndrome. Whatever your slang word is for that person that's not okay, be a human. Serve that person. Or serve yourself so that you can figure out what these symptoms look like. So then you are a subject matter expert that now you recognize it and you say, hey, let me tell you about this thing. It's called operator syndrome. Let me tell you about this thing. It's called firefighter syndrome. Oh my God, what is that? Well, when's the last time you did a sleep study? When's the last time you got your blood work done? I am so privileged. I am so privileged to work with some folks over the course of my injury and even today where we'll go get our blood work done and we'll put it on the table. We'll say, hey, here's where we're at. And we'll say, what are you doing for this? What are you doing for that? And the core community becomes your greatest allies, your greatest supports. And so, yes, it's needed in recruit and retention to make that change. And then as we move into Fire Academy specific, okay, now you've gotten hired on and you're now going to be a recruit, police, fire, EMS, even military. Here's what this is how we handle this here. This is how we do it here. We do it differently and we do it better. Take pride. Right? And when you take pride in that and you recognize it and you adopt it, you adapt and overcome. So in that moment, that needs to be addressed. How we deal with it on the floor as an individual, as a community, as the leaders who are overseeing this, all that needs to change. But the one change that we could really drive is if we're willing to die for our civilians, we should serve each other first and bring that back alive.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. To that point, you were on firefighter craftsmanship, episode 46. I had to look at my notes. And I listened to that again just this morning. And to bring home your point, you have a story that you went to go work at another station. You're not with your crew or on your truck. And you had a call for street racers. Can you share that with the listeners and also your response to that and your crew's response when you got back to your regular crew? I think it's a fantastic, powerful story, and it really just drives home your point.
Yeah, no, it's an honor to share it, because without my crew, and the support that I received from them, could have been a very different story. And we talked earlier, you and I had spoken earlier, to say that a lot of the first responders serve their own communities. And so in that, we come across people we love dearly, or people we know intimately, or buildings we have emotional attachments to because we maybe got married there, or so on and so forth. It was the premise of this story is that I had exactly that. It was close to Christmas, and we roll out. So we'll ship out to another station to kind of cover gaps, So there's a guy's off, Miller, I need you to go over to station 5 and work there. Yep, you bet. So you pack up your life and ship off to the next station for 24. And so that was exactly that. And love the guys that I was working with. No issues around who I was working with. It was the sequence of events that was really difficult for me. So it's about 11 o'clock. We get a call to a MVC, or motor vehicle collision, and get in the truck. And we're not even in the truck like 2 minutes. We're still kind of like adjusting to the reports and the notes of what the call was. And we come up on scene and we see this vehicle, and it is like accordioned around a very large hydro pole. And I recognize the car, and I'm kind of like, what? Okay, hold on. What am I looking at here? And I'm looking at the exact same car, make and model. The way that the windows are tinted, it looks exactly like my stepson. And so my heart goes boom. And I'm like, what the frig? So we get out of the car, and our protocol requires us to do a 360 of the scene. And so I don't even make it to the 360 of the scene. I get to the side passenger door, and I open up the door, and there's a young female who I don't know, but she's the right age. She literally pours out of the vehicle, and I was able to access her. The door was, we could get in. She pours out. I pick her up, and her spine has completely severed and is now not where it should be. And I'm able to get her off to the paramedics. And I turn, as I'm doing this, I'm trying to see who's driving. And I'm looking, and this shape of this young man is incredibly familiar. And I'm like, that's my son. And his hair color, his plaid jacket, everything. So I'm like, I got to get this girl out of here. I need to get in there. So the girl comes out, I come around, and the crew is working on extricating the driver. And in context, I'm about 5'4", 5'5" on a good day. And the smallest person always goes into the smallest holes. So Miller, inside. So here I go. I go inside, and I'm looking at this young man's face, and it's my son. Like the biggest doppelganger I've ever seen in my entire life. The texture of his beard, the coloration of his beard, the jawline, everything about him, the size. This is his car. He's now pinned behind the steering wheel. And I am like, this is my boy. How do I get through this? And I'm now doing compressions. We've lost pulse. And I'm still holding on to this, but I'm like, this isn't him. Is this him? Is this him? Is this him? I can't tell. And I look down at these shoes that he's wearing. And I was like, this is not my boy. He would not wear those shoes. I know for a fact he would not wear those shoes. So I'm like, okay, this isn't Isaiah. This isn't him. And so I'm blinking, and I'm looking at his face, and now my brain was starting to like, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm at a call. I focus in on these red shoes that this young man is wearing, but they were my saving grace to pull myself out of the scene. And although it was so incredibly a strong sensation of identifying with the emergency and feeling the intensity of losing a family member, to now I need to perform and try and save somebody else's family member. But my saving grace was that I was able to pull myself out of the scene by staring at these shoes and stop the process of identifying with the emergency and relating to the emergency, so that not only did it pull me back into a situation where I was now able to perform what was required to save this young man and be effective. But it also allowed me to safeguard, I guess, what I was experiencing. Now, there are first responders in this world that would have been their son. And I have been given a moment in time that will forever have empathy and love for those people that interact and deal with that. But having that ability to pull myself out of the situation was critical. And when the whole thing was over and we got back in the truck and we were driving the 2 minutes back to the station, the captain kind of spins his head around and he says, is everybody okay? And I was like, nope, but I will be. And so that really took him off guard. And, he didn't know how to respond to that. And so didn't answer. And I'm not blaming him for it because what do you say? So we went back to the station, finished the shift, and I was able to compartmentalize where I was in duty. And so I stayed composed and continued to respond to whatever kind of came our way, the remaining part of that night. But the moment I got off shift, I got in my car, I bawled my eyes out, I texted my son and I said, you need to call me right now because I need to hear your voice. And one of the things about my emotions is that they have taught me that if I'm feeling this way, then I need to act on that. So by texting him and getting him to call me, part of my healing process was to say to him, anything that I felt he should hear, that should I lose him tomorrow, I have closed that gap. So I told him, you are the most incredible young man. I could not be more proud of you. He's my stepson, but I love him like he's my own. And, just said thank you for allowing me to be in his life as his stepmom and embracing us as a family. And then kind of went into Christmas and was really, truly able to sort of close that section. Next shift I was in with my crew, we had taken some photos of the vehicle because it didn't go the way we had hoped. And there's a long story behind that, but it didn't go the way we had hoped. There's always challenges in extrication when you're trying to disassemble a vehicle to access a patient. And so I'd taken those photos back to my crew, and I had said, listen, guys, I'm not okay. Happened. And we spent the next 2 hours, we blew up the pictures, we recreated the scene just from a theory component. And we walked through protocol, we walked through procedures. I'm like, I need to redo this. This is not happening again. I need to make sure that if I'm able to contribute in some way, then I need to know what went wrong, reactivate the scene, and look at it. We then did the theory part for a couple hours, and then my captain made provisions for us to go over to a yard where there was actual vehicles, and we spent another minimum of 2 hours cutting up cars, pushing cars, just demolishing them, taking the weirdest, like, what happens if we do this? Could we have pulled him out if we had done this? Could we have pulled this out if we did this? What if we cut that? What if we push this? How does the vehicle respond when we do that? Getting deeper in the craft of firefighting was so important to me as not only a way to be a valuable asset to my team, but more so to close the loop on my own healing. And I was permitted to do so. And if my captain hadn't made those arrangements and my crew wasn't willing to do that with me, who knows what my story would have been. But taking the accountability to be vulnerable with how I felt and what I needed on its way is what I'm recommending to everybody. Most of the time in the fire service industry, I'm going to get roasted for this, but most of the time in the fire service industry, when things don't go well, there is a habit of avoiding it because what are the chances that it'll happen again? And I would venture to guess that that's similar in most first responder industries. I can't speak to the military. But when we acknowledge that something has gone wrong, then we have to acknowledge what we need to do to make it right. And sometimes, again, that flows up to a management position and they're not in the position to address the issues. And so it's skirted to the side or set into a parking lot to deal with later. but the ripple effect depending on the type of the nature of the call, whether it's an exposure to toxins or psychological exposure, now compounds the issue, getting us to that injury finish line, so to speak, faster. So we need to be willing to address those issues on the floor level and take accountability. You hear a lot of the times people say, well, no one's coming for us. We've heard that time and time again. So we need to do this and take accountability for ourselves. Well, then do it. Put your money where your mouth is. And I mean that with a ton of love and respect, because the benefits for you as an individual on the other side are colossal. Why would you not want that? Why would you not want to be stronger, both emotionally, physically, and intellectually? To me, that it's a non-negotiable. So it was a call that took a lot from. And one of the things that I think I really feel I took the most or learned the most from was that now when I know somebody that has lost somebody on scene, or when I know a firefighter or a police officer that has responded to a family member, I can come alongside them and I can be a difference and I can sit quietly with them because I have a better understanding of the challenges that they're facing. And so when we face these challenging times, they have a purpose. And we need to look at it as sets and reps for getting stronger versus trauma. I really dislike trauma. I don't like that word. Just sets and reps. It's training. Yes, there can be a point where it's too much. I get it, but it's just like working out. You work out too much, you need more time to recover.
Mm-hmm.
I'd
say that that story in your explanation and just the lessons that you learned and just shared with us, I should have just said, here's the message, here's the episode for the day, tell that story. And let people pull from that what they want, because just the support from your crew, that culture there in your own house and your own crew, that's it sounds to me like you've either happened upon or you've done a lot of work in shaping that crew to being model crew, the ones that are going to help you roof your house or help you move without beer and pizza.
Oh no, they need beer and pizza. Don't even worry about that.
Well, yeah, after you're moved. We've all learned that lesson at least once. So every bit of this, understanding the injuries, understanding that we need time to recover, the things that we can do to recover. All of the information is found out there, and we're going to direct people there to your specific stuff. PYROC, how did that come about?
Oh boy, I'm going to answer that honestly. I live on a farm in, like I say, Southern Ontario, and it was a snowy day. The snow was up to about my thighs. I was just coming out like
in fairness, though, you're 5'4", 5'5", so it's really not that high. Yes.
Good point. It was up both ways to get to the barn. I was taking, animal food. We have chickens and pigs and stuff like that. And I was taking some food out to the barn. It was like -20. It was super cold. And I was on the other side of 2018, where the moment where it kind of like woke me up. I was on the other side. And I was like, is this all you have for me? I'm just going to be injured and I'm just going to walk through the barn. I'm going to feed some animals and I'm going to go back and I'm not going to help anybody. Like, what is going on? And it's kind of putting it out there. And I was leaning into my face and having strong words. And I said, no, I'm going to start a company and I'm going to make a difference. And I don't know what that company is going to do yet, but nope, nope, this is not happening this way. We can't let people just float through and have this happen. So PYROC was born on the way to a barn, feeding up some chickens and pigs. But and that's just because of who I am. I share that story. But the truth of the matter is that it is a vessel, and its purpose is to drive change, and one day provide opportunity to find solutions that are for everything we've talked about today. We can't just sit here and acknowledge this issue and do nothing about it. And we know that in this world, do something about it. You sort of have 3 ways of doing it. You have the stream of going through the government. That's a whole other podcast. We have the stream of becoming a not-for-profit organization. And there are many out there doing beautiful work. I'm not so sure we need another not-for-profit organization. And then there's the opportunity to open up a company under a private sector that can have a unique voice, and PYROC is born.
I love that. Every single bit of it. That's fantastic. Purpose and mission with being a firefighter, being an advocate, being a mom, being a wife, a stepmom, speaker, and all of those other things. Do you still have time to feed the animals?
No, my husband doesn't.
How do you do it all?
I don't. I absolutely don't. As I said, a little while ago, we talked about what are the things that you have learned about firefighter syndrome and operator syndrome. And I now have also found a grace to say, no, I can't do this today, and emotionally not berate myself. There are days where it's 2:00 in the afternoon, and if I don't sleep, I can't even write a sentence. So it's recognizing my own limitations, asking for help, but using my time wisely. And in order to use my time wisely, I have to have very strong, very, very strong ability and sort of pillars that define me. And so for me, faith is number 1, family is number 2. And if they are not in place, then everything else about me falls apart. So they become my priority. I take care of them. They take care of me. And then the rest of my time is dedicated towards executing whatever's required for the day. Can't worry about tomorrow. There's always a big vision. There's always a strategic objective. And there are steps in achieving that objective. But if the day doesn't take care of itself, tomorrow doesn't exist. So it's about being present where I am in the moment and just doing my best.
Well, that's it. That is sound advice. Well, Jadie, where can people find you?
Well, LinkedIn is probably the social media platform of choice. I do have Instagram, but I don't use it. So LinkedIn is the best. Also, email jadie.miller@pyroc.com, or you can find me on my website. It's pyroc.com as well.
All right. And I'm going to have links to all of that stuff, and also the doctor, Chris's website, Dr. Chris Free, and Operator Syndrome, Firefighter Syndrome, the articles on Crackle Magazine, the worksheet. There it is right there. I'm going to have all of that stuff linked in there, so there's no excuse for people not to be able to find you. I cannot thank you enough for coming and sharing your story and parts of the things you found out about your injury and thriving, and just the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for every bit of it. I'm inspired beyond measure. So thank you. And you got any parting shots for us?
No, I just want to say thanks so much to you and for having me be a part of your show and tell my story. I hope that someone out there today has found hope and has found that they're not alone, and they're like, oh, snap, you got me. We got you. So, and that I just want to always, I know on Dr. Chris's episode, I want to mirror sort of what he did, which is there's hope. There's always hope. Just get up and keep moving forward in the right direction. And the only way you can do that is by being honest with yourself where you are currently and today. I just hope to inspire that change.
Well, Jadie, we appreciate it. And thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Tell the Story. I hope you're moved to action after this episode with Jadie Miller. If you'd like to connect with Jadie, she can be found on LinkedIn at Jadie Miller. Also, go to pyroc.com, spelled PYROC.com. Find Jadie's articles, I Have Something, But It's Not PTSD, and Firefighter Syndrome on Crackle. Also, find the study Firefighter Syndrome on Dr. Chris Free's website at chrisfree.com. All the links will be in the show notes. Once again, a huge thank you to Polestar Coffee for sponsoring this episode. Fuel your mission with the finest of blends. Visit polestarcoffee.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Every rating helps us to continue sharing these important stories. Follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or my YouTube channel. Or just visit DougWhiteOfficial.com for all the links. Share your feedback, suggest guests, or tell us about topics you'd like us to cover. Thanks for tuning in to tell this story, and remember, there's always a way forward. We'll see you next time.